Hey, praise the Lord, guys. I am Straw Greenhorn. So then the governor said unto the people, Whether of the twain will ye that I release unto you? And the multitude said, Barabbas. Then the governor said, What shall I do then with Jesus who is called Christ? And they said, Crucify him. So the governor said unto the people, Why? What evil had he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Crucify him. Now when the governor saw that he could prevail nothing, but rather that a tumult was made, took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, Innocent of the blood of this just person, see ye to it. But then the multitude answered and said, His blood be on us and our children. So then the governor released unto them Barabbas, and after he had scourged Jesus, delivered him over to be crucified. All right, so here we see a continuation of my last video, where now we're standing before the governor Pontius Pilate, and at this point he's deduced that they delivered him for envy, because he's seeing Jesus' reaction, how he's just being calm and collected, and he's not really fazed by anything that they're doing or saying. And these people, they're just getting more vulgar and more violent. So the governor, he's able to identify that these are nothing but just, even though they are men of authority in position, the chief priests, elders, scribes, and Pharisees and Sadducees, that they really are nothing but just whoremongers at this point. And he's making every attempt he can to deliver Jesus. At this feast, he's customary to releasing one prisoner, and thinking that people will agree with releasing Jesus, even though they just brought him to him. So that was kind of a hard thing. Ain't no way they would release him, having not even been in their custody for more than a couple hours. We just saw his wife warn him about, see that they'll have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. God speaking to the wife. And that's where he got that term from, when he said, if you notice, he said, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. He got that from the wife. So, here we see Herod, trying to separate himself from this responsibility, from this whole situation. We see him washing his hands, but just like what happened with Herod and John the Baptist, when he made the oath after Herodias' daughter danced before him, and then they went and asked for the head of John the Baptist. So he was unable to turn back. So at this feast, kind of the same thing, that because of all the years prior, they were accustomed to releasing one prisoner. So that was a given. And the people, they were asking for Jesus to be crucified, just like they asked for John the Baptist's head. Now they're asking for Jesus. And these men of authority, see, that's why sometimes, as a leader, you got to be strong and principled in what you do. You should never do things, based on the fear of disappointing or receiving disapproval from people. I know that, in theory, especially as leaders, that we should just do the right thing. The basis and the reasons for why we do something is because it was the right thing to do. And if you understand that in this world, that the right thing, it often comes consequences from people, because just the morality of the world and how things are. And, we're getting worse and worse as time progresses. In the old days, adultery maybe wasn't such a big thing. Yeah, it did happen, but not on the scale that is happening today, where everything is available at the click of a downloading an app and swiping right, swiping left. And they even have certain platforms devoted specifically to people that want to have affairs, that want to cheat on their spouse. And these things are all normal. Back in the days, this was a shock, to people. So morality is declining. So it's not surprising that in these last days that we would see these things happen. So what I'm saying is that a person should never make decisions based on fear of disapproval or disappointing somebody. Because in the world that we live in, you got to understand that if you're going to be honorable, expect to be hated. And I think that King Herod, and here we see the governor Pontius Pilate, that's a lesson that they failed to learn or to grasp or understand. Because, I would say that it would be better for you to break your word to somebody to do the right thing. Them asking for Jesus and, expecting it to be accustomed to release unto them a certain prisoner. Break your word to the people and do the right thing. Just like with King Herod and John the Baptist. Break the oath that you just made, promising to give whatever she would ask. Break that oath, deliver John the Baptist. There's something to think about. All right, so let's get into the scripture. So he starts out saying, the governor said unto the multitude, Whether of the twain would you that I release unto you? And they said, Barabbas. So now, he's still trying to appease and ease them into releasing Jesus. Here, this is an attempt, to kind of nudge them a little bit, because he already knows what they want. Just by how they're arguing and carrying on, he knows. So, this shouldn't even have been a question, but you can see he's trying to deliver him. Worse, his wife just told him about the dream that she had. And like I said in my last video, it's amazing that they will come down to these two people, because I'm sure they had more worthy people in jail to be released than Barabbas. We know Barabbas was very famous. He's like one of those old-time gangsters. And I don't know why people would advocate for him to be released, because I'm sure that when he is out, he's going to be the ones that, stealing your animals. He's going to be the ones, breaking into your house and stealing stuff. He's going to be the one, harassing maybe your wife when she's walking in public. He's going to be the one causing all kind of problems. And for you guys to advocate for this one to be released, I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure there's a Cinderella story in that jail somewhere. somebody that, they got in there, trying to do right, but wrong ended up happening. Where, and if you were to hear their story, that you would applaud, and everybody would go home happy if you were to release this person. And like I said, Jesus, who hadn't even been in their custody, for more than a couple of hours. So then the governor said, "So then what will ye that I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" And they said, "Crucify him." So it wasn't, because in one of the other gospels we hear them say that it's not in their power to put people to death. That's why they brought him to the governor here, Pontius Pilate, because that's definitely what they wanted. Plus, it would keep their hands clean, that they weren't actually the ones who put him to death, as much as they were advocating and persuading the crowd and just manipulating behind the scenes for this to happen. So they were trying to keep their hands clean, and maybe they didn't have the authority and power. Because if you look at the Old Testament, whenever a person did certain things that there was no coming back from, they would stone them to death. So they were, maybe, because if you look at the woman caught in adultery, it was the scribes and Pharisees that came onto him, saying that this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. The law of Moses bade us stone her, but what sayest thou? So they did have authority to stone people, but they weren't looking to stone him. They were looking to crucify him. And nowhere in the Old Testament, nowhere in the law of Moses was it given for anyone to be crucified. So that's where we come full circle here. That's why they have to bring him onto Herod and Pilate. Now, King Herod is not mentioned in this. This is taken from Matthew. If you check the other gospels, maybe you'll find him there. But because it said that they kept, going back and forth between Herod and Pilate, because none of them wanted to put him to death. They were each afraid. So they kept sending him, back and forth between them. And it was said that that very day they became friends, because before time they were enemies. And that even King Herod, when he saw Jesus, that he had heard so much about him, he wanted to see some miracle performed, because he never got to see any, but Jesus never did. And I find that ironic, because this is the same King Herod that, just like I said, put John the Baptist to death. He beheaded him after he married his brother's wife and then daughter, dance, and then asked for the head of John the Baptist in a silver charger. By and by, give me the head of John Baptist in a silver charger. So, sitting here speaking, I just learned something, that the reason why they brought him onto Herod and Pontius Pilate is because they didn't have the authority to crucify people. Stoning to death, yes. Crucifying, no. And they were determined that that's how they would kill him. Because otherwise, when they brought him to the palace of the high priest, which is when he was taken in the garden of Gethsemane, when Judas came and kissed him and said, whosoever I shall kiss, the same as he, hold him fast. And all the disciples fled and left him, and Peter followed afar off. First place they took him was to the high priest's palace. If it was a matter of stoning, then they would have taken him right there. End of story. So what shall I do then with Jesus, who is called Christ? So it doesn't really say how he came to that information that he was called the Christ, but he was very famous, and everywhere he went, it seemed like they would always refer to him as the son of David. And we know that the son of David is the one who would be the Christ. And also, remember, they were accusing him of many things. This fellow said that I will destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. This fellow said that he is some king and forbidding us to pay tribute to Caesar. This fellow said that, by whom do your children cast them out, therefore they shall be your judges. All the things that they must have said, the fact that they said that he was Christ, that must have slipped out at some point. But he referred to him as Jesus, who is called Christ. So you see, he's really trying to absolve himself from guilt here and condemnation, making it plain that he's not the one that did this. Because, putting the fact out there that he's the Christ and then washing his hands, as we're about to see, he's creating for himself a trail of breadcrumbs for him to back out of. Because it seems as if you would look close enough to the situation, it would seem as if he's creating his story for the ultimate judgment. I mean, the judgment day of God, when he would stand and have to give account. If you listen to him how he's talking, washing his hands in the water, referring to him, what shall I do with him that is called Christ? He even said before, whether of the twain shall I release unto you. Can you see him formulating his story? He's going to stand before the Most High and say, well, you see, I asked them, which one shall I release unto you? I was sure to mention Jesus because I know who he is, and it's not my fault. I had nothing to do with it. And then you see this, the next thing I said unto them was, what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ? You see, I even called him the Christ. I knew who he was. And you see, they said, crucify him. So in the next scripture, it says, why? What evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, crucify him. So he's really created his alibi right now, Pontius Pilate, because he even understands the ridiculousness of the situation. Because, all right, so they just presented all their accusations, and he sat there and he listened to all of them, every single one. And now here he is saying, why? What evil hath he done? I mean, unless the people are going to come again, repeat all these accusations that they just said, what evil they are accusing him of. But he's wiping the dish clean and presenting it clean before them, saying, why? What evil hath he done? You guys are presenting nothing before me. Yeah, I've heard all these things, but It's like he's saying that none of you have stood ground and taken root before me. You might as well have said nothing before me. Why? What evil hath he done? Because he just sat there and listened. If you think about it, he just sat there and listened to every accusation, one after the other. And here he is saying, what evil hath he done? So then the Bible says that when the governor saw that he could prevail nothing, but rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude and said, I am innocent blood of this just person. See to it. So the fact that, all right, so if you look at it, when he saw that he could prevail nothing, so he was actually trying to convince them. So this just shows you that, see, not because everybody is saying something means that it's the right thing to do, the right thing to believe, or the right thing, period. And that one still small voice that everybody's against might just be the most, truthful voice. Because see, it's happening right here. When he saw that he could prevail nothing, so he was actually wrestling with them. I'm pretty sure he was thinking, all right, so let me throw this out there and see how they respond to that. All right, so all right, maybe if I say this next, I could corner them a little bit, and then all right, so take a step back here and attack them. Say this next. He was strategizing to see if he could slowly nudge them. He was trying to nudge them towards doing the right thing, which he knew the right thing to be. But after a while, they say you can take the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So he saw that he could prevail nothing. There was just too many of them. They were too convinced. There was no way he was going to win this battle. But at the same time, he wanted to maintain integrity. But, like I said, did he not have the power to just say, well, I know and I understand that, you guys brought him here for jealousy. I understand and I can see. Because isn't that the role of a judge? When you go inside any courtroom, in today's court of law, I've never seen a judge make a decision because he was afraid of disappointing somebody or afraid of, what people would say or think. But here we have this judge doing that very thing. Did he not have the authority and the power to just say, you guys are out of line and I know this is a circus that you guys are doing. And I'm going to release this man because I found no fault in him and he is innocent. The honor that he would have received from God. But at the same time, Jesus, he did come here to die and it was written and it was necessary for our behalf. Okay. But that just shows you the strength of character and purpose, strength of identity, of vision and clarity, doing things for reasons that are sound reasons, honorable reasons that have backbone and stability and purpose and strength, and not just doing things for the crowd's applause, not just doing things, for controversy, for people to talk about you, for fame or popularity. Because it's not said in this gospel, but in one of the other ones, when he said unto Jesus, know ye not that I have the power to crucify you or to release you? What did Jesus say? Therefore, he that delivereth me unto you hath the greater sin. So whoever brought me to you, you having this power to crucify me or to release me, had the greater sin, which means what? You also have sinned. And whatever he was trying to back himself out of, the answer was given right there. I believe the answer was given right there. Because you see him trying to create, like I said, a trail of breadcrumbs. With everything he says, he's gonna point, the Most High back to these conversations, these threads, and say, you see, I said this, but he already gave the answer. Therefore, he that delivered me unto you. These people that you see are accusing me, they have the greater sin. He didn't say they have the only sin. They have the greater, which means that yours is less than theirs. It means that what? You also, for the reason because, you being appointed judge, a judge, he judges, and he judges righteously and fairly. So when he saw that he could prevail nothing, rather that a tumult was made, which means that the more he tries, the worse and worse you're getting. You're getting in more of a frenzy. It's like when, sharks blood in the water and they just go wild. That's what was happening. But like I said, they weren't, buffeting him and spitting in his face and smacking him, saying, prophesy unto us who did smite thee, as they were behaving in the high priest's palace. So that just leads me to ask the question, how much was the high priest in on all this, that they could behave like this in his presence, but they could not behave like that in the presence of the governor, Pontius Pilate? Isn't the man of faith supposed to be more honorable than the man of the government that's of straight, government, elected official? All right, so then he brought out water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am clean of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. So you guys are doing this, and I have no say in it. So this washing of the water was to signify that. But I don't know. It's going to be a conversation between him and God, because Jesus just said, like I said, therefore he that brought me unto you had the greater sin, and he said that directly to him. He said that directly to him. He that brought me unto you had the greater sin. It means that you also have sinned. It's lesser than theirs. It's smaller than theirs. That's why he said less, the greater, because something, it can't just be great all by itself. itself. Greater. Something cannot be greater by itself. Something can be great by itself, but to be greater means that at least two things are in comparison, which means that they are on the board and you are also on the board. They are on the table and you are also on the table. And he already gave you that answer. So all this, this whining and squirming is gonna be, I suspect, of no avail. But who knows? I guess only time will tell. So then the multitude answered and said, His blood be on us and our children. Sometimes you say something, sometimes we say things and we have no idea what it is that we're saying. They really didn't respect Jesus, who he came and told them that he was. Because this right here, His blood be on us and our children. What does the word give reference to? It says that every man shall give account of every word spoken, even idle words. Are you sure you want to accept his blood on you and on your children? Look at you pronouncing curses on your children. They have nothing to do with any of this. You deliberately pronounce it through pride and boastfulness. His blood be on us and our children. So we don't care. It doesn't matter. We don't care, and we don't care even that we don't care. And right now, it's just a battle of ego. And you see, because we have authority right now, we're going to do whatever we want. Not even realizing that sometimes the table, it does turn. But you know what they say? What a day when the tables will turn. All right, so then it says, he released unto them Barabbas. So this murderer, he gets to go free. He must be so happy. But like I said, he didn't do all this by himself. All his boys, they followed him. What a thing it must be to have, your guys follow you into all this insurrection and murder, and then to watch you walk free. You was the ringleader, you called all the shots, and then they go down for it. If you look in today's court of law, usually they'll look for, like, for example, in a drug ring, they'll use the smaller guys to get to the bigger guy. Using the small fish to get to the fish. But here it's the opposite, because we're letting the big fish go and we're holding on to all the small fishes. So he released unto them Barabbas. And then when he had scourged Jesus, he whipped him, then he delivered him over to be crucified. How comes you're saying that you're innocent and you're allowing him to be whipped like this in your presence? I don't know how well that story is gonna hold up, when the time comes. Because they just whipped him in the high priest's palace, and now they're whipping him here. I am Straw Greenhorn.